Now we have to do the binding. Now I want to cut these really as long as possible. You want them to be fairly precise. It's going to be folded, ironed, sewn on, and then folded over and sewn again. So 3 inches good, because once it's folded in half and then folded over the edge of the quilt again, you're going to get about 3/4 of an inch of a binding. Okay, so here are our strips, and you're going to take them and you're going to, and they're really long, but don't be daunted, you want them long. And you're going to take right sides of work facing, which means the clearest, sharpest side, and you're going to put them together. And you're going to make sure that your ends are square, because you want your strips to be lined up against each other. If your ends aren't square, if the end of your fabric isn't square, I recommend taking a ruler to it and cutting it square. And we're just going to sew it straight across, so that we now have a longer strip of fabric. All right, so here we have my strips, and they're all sewn together. Now, what we're going to do, we are going to fold this in half, lengthwise, with the wrong sides facing each other. And we're just going to press this down. And as we iron it, we're going to roll it up. Here is our finished quilt. Okay, well, our finished, it's all in layers. First off, if you have to trim a tiny bit off here and there, that's fine. So now we're going to take the raw edge of our binding, leaving about 3 to 4 inches, and we're going to pin the raw edge of the binding to the raw edge of the quilt from behind, and pin it in place, making sure that you're pinning through all 3 layers. And as we go, we're just going to unroll it from our cardboard piece that is holding our binding all in place. I'm just about done pinning this all on, but here's something I want to show you. Remember that extra bit I told you to leave on the end? That's this here, so that we could go around the corner. And all I do for the corner is I just pinch it up and then go around the corner. What I want to show you is the easiest way to connect these 2 pieces. So what we're going to do to attach these 2 so that we can continue to sew in a seamless way, sort of seamless way, we're going to open the end here. We're going to make a cuff. And if you want to either pin it in place or iron it, that's fine. But I'm just making the cuff, and then I'm bringing this piece over, and I'm just laying it down crease to crease and folding this back up and just pin that in place. And now we can sew. Okay, now here's our corner, and I've actually sewn up to it, but this is the way I have my corner. I've just given myself enough that I can kind of pinch it so that it comes to a point, and then fold it over here. Okay, so I've got it on the sewing machine. Here is my corner, and I'm just going to fold this over, push this in and fold this over, and I'm going to sew almost to the corner. Then I'm going to lift my presser foot, leaving the needle in the fabric. I've got my corner here, and I don't want to sew all the way across. I'm just going to take this and scrunch it up so that everything gathers in the corner. Take it right to the corner, back stitch a couple, and of course my thread breaks. These corners may be a bit dicey to do, but they're even dicier to try and film when your small tripod is busted. Okay. All right, so now I'm just going to take it up to the corner where I want. I'm going to lift the presser foot and I'm going to turn it, and then I'm going to drop the presser foot back down. And that's as far as I'm going to go at the moment because I want to show you what I've just done. So what this does is this allows me that when I flip this over, I'm going to have a corner pocket for the corner of the quilt. So when I'm invisible stitching, I will show you what I've done here. Okay, now let's start with the corner, okay? Because that's the fussy part. Now, as you can see, it is sewn to the front of the quilt, and we've gone through all the layers. And now we're just going to fold our binding over just before the corner. And if you have a part that's like a little bit long and it may, mess up your binding looking smooth, just trim that off. Just don't cut into the stitching where you've sewn your binding on, or cut your binding. All right, so we're going to bring this down. Now, I have doubled my thread. A lot of people don't, but I have not put a knot on it. And what I'm going to do is, let me get you a little closer here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the quilt at the front, and I'm going to come up through the binding, and I'm going to pull, and I'm just going to take the thread. I'm going to trim the end off nice and even. And I'm just going to give that just a gentle tug until that tail end disappears. You don't want to pull it out. You don't want to pull it all the way through. And then I'm just going to stitch through where I came out a couple of times to anchor it into place. So we're going to go back through the spot underneath where your first stitch is, and we're going to go between the layers of the quilt. It's not going to show through on the back. Your needle's not going to show through on the back, and it's going through the batting basically and up to your next spot, so that the line or the stitch in between these two spots is hidden in the batting. So we're going to go back through that stitch right where it came out. It came out on the binding, but we're going to go back through the quilt top to the next spot and pull. Now again, if you want these to be truly invisible, you can do several things. You can use invisible thread, which is like a really fine fishing line, or you can use single thickness your thread, but I like to be sure that this is going to hold together. Once you get the hang of this, it's really simple. So we'll go down through where the stitch came out, into the quilt top, and through the batting and back up through the binding. You don't see any stitches on the back, and you can barely see the stitches on the front. Let me do a close-up one for you. It's come up through the binding. We're going to go through the quilt just below the binding where the stitch came out, and we're going to come up next to and there it is, almost invisible. Okay, here's our corner, and I've almost done the blind or invisible stitching right up to it. Now, remember how we did the corner? Because of the way I folded it when I was sewing it on the back, I can just fold it over at the corner and Bob's your uncle. We have a nice, neat, mitered corner. Now, if you want your binding perfectly straight, please, folks, when you fold it over, pin it. I'm at the stage in my quilting that I do a lot of eyeballing stuff, but you may want to pin this all in place before you start doing your invisible stitching. As long as your binding comes over and covers that stitching where you've sewed it on the back. See?